Today's show is sponsored by RX Bar, a whole food protein bar made with 100% whole ingredients. RX bars are gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free. There's no added sugar, no artificial colours, artificial flavours, preservatives, or fillers. For 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/soccer and enter promo code soccer at checkout. The link is, of course, in the show notes. Hello and welcome to a special On the Road Total Soccer show. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who didn't know trains could suffer from turbulence. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
I didn't, still don't. Not sure they should.
It shook quite a lot on the way from Richmond to Philly.
I also enjoyed the part where we each got a glass of wine and they were tilting at a precarious angle because the train appeared to be tilting at a precarious angle itself.
I feel like Amtrak is just a big wine scam to get you to buy more.
I think so. And it worked.
So we are in our Airbnb in Philly. We're here for the United Soccer Coaches Convention. Please forgive any echo in the room. This isn't our usual sort of hermetically sealed studio environment.
I apologize for nothing.
We have got lots of listener questions for you today.
We do indeed.
Do you want to get straight into it?
I do, although I just want to comment. I've enjoyed our day together.
You sound surprised.
Well, it's just been an interesting
You're not
one.
expecting
it's
it?
It's just, like several states, a couple different weird meals that we've had, a couple different strange experiences of thinking maybe a train was going to flip, a conversation about which one of us would be which character in Unbreakable. It's been a different kind of day, but I've enjoyed it.
TSS field trip.
Indeed.
And if you're wondering about the convention, we're hoping to get some good audio and some stuff, some people we meet here. Try and bring you a little variety on the Total Soccer Show this week.
I'm going to challenge,
but a little less echo than today.
Yeah, hopefully. I'm going to challenge one of the presidential candidates to a fist fight. We'll see how that goes.
We're going to talk US soccer presidential candidates later in today's show.
Also, candidates out there who might be rolling with security, I'm not going to do that. Please don't have me detained. Before we get to the first question, I wanted to talk about Landon Donovan.
Sure. So we mentioned him at the top of the Sunday show, I believe. There's been the unveiling. Landon Donovan was unveiled to the Club Leon fans. He's going to play in Liga MX. That weird rumour that we thought was a prank was real all along.
It was indeed. He is indeed still wearing number 20. He has denied that was a reference to Dos Aceto. He said it's like his second favourite number, I think. I still feel like it's a reference to Dos Aceto.
So when we talked about this the first time, we talked about it from the sort of how we feel about Landon Donovan perspective. But you saw a tweet that's got you thinking bigger picture, Taylor. Indeed. I love it when your horizons are expanded.
Always. From Professor Stephen Bank on Twitter at Prof Bank said, I suspect that if Liga MX starts making inroads with the English language MLS fans in the US as a result of signing Landon Donovan and other US stars, that is far more likely to make MLS evolve and adapt than the US Soccer Federation elections, the NASL lawsuit, or competition from a rival domestic league.
Hello, 280 characters.
Right. He used them all, but I appreciate them all.
But I think he's got a point though, right? Like Donovan going down there is going to get more mainstream attention from US soccer fans than, for example, the emergence of Jonathan Gonzalez, right? Like we were on it because we're nerds, but a few people were late coming to the Jonathan Gonzalez thing just as he kind of flipped. Is the phrase I'm using. Donovan playing in Liga MX is going to get a lot more attention from your sort of more mainstream US soccer fans.
Yes, and I think I'm correct in saying that I saw a tweet that was like his jersey is selling for like more than some season tickets cost to Liga MX games. And I think that
Does that just mean tickets are cheap?
Yes, but I think it also means that there is a financial stake or a financial like motivator for Liga MX clubs to start looking at some American players who are looking to come back from like clubs abroad and think maybe we hijack some of those bids, maybe we get a little bit more interest. And I do think
Tigres?
Yeah. I mean, why not?
You could see some of those moves.
Sure. But I mean that like I think that will maybe motivate clubs or MLS to think about how they change player allocation rules, about international roster spots, that type of thing. Because if Liga MX start poaching talent, start taking away those big names that would be a big draw to domestic audiences, maybe you start to get a little bit worried. Imagine
Major League Soccer's nightmare future, which is where maybe there's... Because right now, Liga MX is only broadcast in Spanish here in the US, right? On Univision and ESPN Deportes, as far as I'm aware.
Yep.
There's the Facebook live stream in English occasionally, right? But it's not regular. What if there is an English language TV contract and Liga MX gets bigger than Major League Soccer in the United States? I mean, not impossible because MLS fans won't like this, but we watched some Liga MX watching Jonathan Gonzalez. it's a higher standard without a doubt.
It is, and then you also get like very exciting up-and-coming players from the Mexican national team, from other leagues around the world. It seems like they're starting to draw like up-and-coming Colombian players to Liga MX before they make that move because they have the pipeline to Europe that we've already talked about previously. So you could start to see a lot more young talent and then also veteran, well-known talent coming into that league.
Let's get Andrew Carlton down there.
Let's not do that. I don't think Atlanta fans would like that. We won't punish Atlanta fans that way. But I think it is something that if that started to happen, if they did start to get more English language commentary, maybe if they got like a British and American who have some commentary experience doing English language commentary, then maybe that would also help grow the league.
All right. Well, let's not get too worried if you're a Major League Soccer owner because there's also, we did a lot of the show by tweet today.
Yeah.
There's a Zach Goldman tweet. Zach Goldman points out that Club Leon will overnight become far and away the number one team for the thousands of US men's national team fans who are looking to regularly and seriously engage with Liga MX for the first time. For us, it would be for the second time. Right? And they don't have anything ready in terms of English language or US-focused web, social, or retail. Wild.
It just grows the mystery, baby. That's all.
Well, I did go to the website and it said under construction. So that's not just the English language part. That's the entire Club Leon website was under construction when I visited there 2 days ago.
Yeah, maybe it's
don't know if that's still the same.
Maybe it's just a tit for tat for the US soccer website that doesn't have anything for Spanish speakers.
Is that right?
Maybe they're just waiting until those things get evened out.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on Donovan at Club Leon. I don't know when his debut is. Maybe we'll find that out in the next day or so. I'm assuming he's kind of got to get fit, right? He's in a gym somewhere right now.
I mean, I think he stays pretty fit, but I imagine he's got to get up
Liga
there.
MX match fit?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a different level of fit, right?
Man, it's going to be a big bummer if he plays
That's
one
bigger
game.
than standing next to Stu Holden fit.
This is true. What if he plays one game and then that's it? That would be a huge bummer.
That would be very disappointing. That would be like Socrates at Garforth Town.
It would. Do you wonder also if this is completely out of nowhere, complete speculation, but do you wonder if part of this is also the U.S. not making the World Cup? Maybe it is Fox. Like maybe if Donovan knows he's going to be in the broadcast booth doing the World Cup, doing U.S. games with Stu Holden.
I don't think he's doing the World Cup now. I think this is part of his contract is he's going to go... Oh, no, because he'll have the summer off,
But that's
right?
my point, is I wonder if the U.S. qualifies, if he says, no, I'm good, I want to go do the commentary, I want to kind of grow that career. But now that the U.S. isn't there, maybe that limits his opportunities a little bit. So maybe the club's saying, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money to come play for us. Suddenly slightly more alluring.
So he doesn't have to worry so much about covering the January camp game against Bosnia.
As much as everybody wants to do that.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that. We'll definitely keep an eye on Landon Donovan.
Yep.
The new Jonathan Gonzalez. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 listener questions to answer today, plus the US soccer presidential candidate chat we're going to have later on.
The first question, I'll take it. I'll let you go.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah, RJ Wilson asks or says, given the recent performances of players that were not a part of the recent unpleasantness,
that means the failure to qualify for the World Cup for new listeners.
Indeed. He's thinking of Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and Danny
Williams.
I paused for a moment to think of Williams. And the decision of Jonathan Gonzalez to play for Mexico, partially due to a lack of contact from the USMNT. Do we as supporters and fans need to be more critical and outspoken when it comes to national team selection?
You asking me?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Okay.
So I would say yes, but it needs to be more than just cynicism.
I mean,
right?
I think screaming into the void has been proven time and time again to really get results.
So I think even throughout this entire campaign, a lot of people were sort of down on Michael Bradley, down on Omar Gonzalez, as we were, down on Graham Zusi at right back, not thrilled when Jesse Zardes was in the team. There was a lot to complain about, but I think there's a difference between being critical and complaining. And I think the good version of being critical is to advocate for the players you want in the team, as opposed to just be like mad about the players who are in there that you don't like.
Yeah,
is that fair?
And yeah, it absolutely is, and it's something I would say, without going too much into detail, it's something I think we've seen in politics lately. Is people, it's easier to be cynical and to be angry about things that you see happening rather than what can you do to help change that? What can you do to promote your ideas as opposed to just attack other things? And so to say, for example, if you get frustrated that a man named Zam Grusi happens to constantly make the team and you don't think he should, rather than just getting really angry about it and writing all caps tweets, but to analyze, like, why doesn't he fit? Why shouldn't he be playing versus why should your preferred player at, say, right back be the one that should be included?
But to take it a step further with RJ Wilson, right? Even if you're doing a very sort of eloquent why Graham Zusi shouldn't be in the team.
Zam Grusi.
Oh, excuse me, Zam Grusi. And why the right back you think should be in the team. And that's after the roster has been announced.
Yeah.
I would argue that's not that helpful. I think the sort of what US fans and, podcasters could do is maybe earlier on, make the case and make it loud to advocate for someone that you would prefer to see. Like maybe in hindsight, we could have been more sort of, hey, Tyler Adams should be given a chance at right back for the US men's national team. He's a better backup than DeAndre Yedlin. He would have been much more helpful and like almost like start a bandwagon rolling that's so big that the people at US Soccer notice it. And you may even have some influence on team selection. I'm talking like TIFO in the stands, right? And the TIFO doesn't have to be Portland saying stuff about Seattle and Seattle saying stuff about Portland. The TIFO could be like a New York fan with Tyler Adams for America.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That happens in England. There are banners like people have their favourite player that plays for their club team. There'll be, Andy Cole for England would be a Man United banner.
Little known fact is that Daryl Grove constantly has a Dele Alli for England banner on him at all times, just in case.
And it's worked.
Just in case.
It's worked.
But I would say even like, maybe this is a bit sillier, but I would say even like a sustained hashtag that gets your point across, because that is something that you can easily grow. And again, I don't mean cynicism, but I do think sometimes soccer fans or pundits or podcasters or whatever can be a little bit in a bubble.
You pointed at me for all three.
That's fair. But it can be in a little bit of a bubble, because I saw Herculez Gomez pointing out after Jonathan Gonzalez decided, or was like on the bubble but leaning towards Mexico, he was saying like, there's not a lot of mainstream coverage of this. People aren't really that upset about this and aren't really covering it the way they should be.
Yep.
And to me, I was like, yes, we are. We're talking about it all the time. We talk about it like once a week at a minimum. But it occurs to me that like just because we do that, just because we title the show, Jonathan Gonzalez scores again or plays again, doesn't mean that we're actually...
It's mostly tackles again.
Also that. Blocks off space. Again, less of a sexy title. But it doesn't mean that we're really helping promote the idea that USA needs to cap tie him. USA, like Jonah for USMNT, hashtag, maybe helps grow it. Maybe you start that campaign to get a little bit more attention behind it. So suddenly US Soccer thinks, hey, wait, did we call him? We definitely talked to him on the phone, right? We didn't? Somebody call him right now.
Do you really believe that? Because part of me really believes that even though you want to think that the people at the top know what they're doing, I also believe that if they're not doing a thing that you think is an obvious thing they should do, if there's a big groundswell of people demanding it, somebody at US Soccer headquarters will notice and somebody will say something to someone. Not guaranteed, but it's possible, right? I really believe it's possible.
I think that's the key point. I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think it's certainly the better alternative than just getting angry and writing in all caps about how this team sucks or that guy's terrible. Like, and I have done that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I have been frustrated by the US. I've been frustrated by the club teams that I support, but it doesn't help. And if anything, I think it just makes everybody more agitated, more riled up. And I would compare it to like, if you're in a room with a bunch of people watching a TV show and you think it's funny, but there's that one person who is vocally angry, you're not going to be so like, yeah, this is a great show. You're going to be like, yeah, okay, I guess I see that flaw.
Yeah.
Whereas if you watch it with a person
Don't
who loves
invite
it,
that person next time.
that's what I'm saying. And so like, if you can help change that dialogue and change that approach, I think that goes a long way.
I've had that. I've had people ruin shows or movies for me because they sort of haven't enjoyed it, and their sort of lack of affection has impacted me.
It's a bad example, but the first time I saw Anchorman, I saw it in theaters with my father, who hated it. And I remember thinking like, this movie's so dumb. And then I talked to all my friends and they're like, are you kidding? This is like the greatest comedy of all time. Watched it again by myself. Very, very funny.
It's a great example.
Anchorman 2, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, lots more questions to come. But first, I want to talk about Kyle Martino's updated manifesto. This segment is sponsored by Squarespace because we noticed that Kyle Martino, Phil Doucette actually pointed out to me on Twitter, Kyle Martino's US Soccer presidential website was made with Squarespace.
Hashtag brand awareness. See? Hashtags. Thanks, Phil.
Maybe Kyle Martino listened and was like, I know,
sure.
I know which platform I should use to launch my manifesto website.
You never know. You never know, Daryl. Yeah, so we took a look at it. I'm not going to lie. I have skimmed it. I have not read it in detail because food poisoning is a thing, but...
Oh, yeah, that's where Taylor's been for the last 3 days, by the way.
A little bit.
If anyone was wondering.
But food poisoning, or I got my flu shot, and maybe that just gave me the flu. Either way, I'm just willing to
There will be doctors listening who will not be happy.
I know,
with
we'll
you
get some emails.
Yeah.
And I don't really believe it. I really don't believe it, except that as soon as I got the flu shot the next day, I was like, ooh, I don't feel so good. Who knows? Anyway,
yes.
So I do plan to read it in much more detail, especially because we plan on seeing Kyle Martino do his 1v1 interview conversation.
One-on-one.
I like 1v1.
Have they branded it as 1v1?
No, it's one-on-one, but I prefer 1v1. And I would prefer to be fully prepared to listen to him talk. But I skimmed it, and the 2 parts I read more in detail than the others were part 1, as you do, the transparency initiative, which I really, really appreciated because I do think that the US Soccer, especially with the way that it was heavily involved in the investigations into FIFA. I do think it kind of should be the standard bearer for transparency and anti-corruption and kind of setting the standard for how a federation should operate. And I don't think
the change you want to see in the world.
There it is. And I don't think it's doing that right now. So I really like that that's what he led with.
Wasn't one of the things he was saying that like everybody who's a board member and earns above a certain amount, or anyone who's involved and earns above a certain amount, like their salaries should be public and their tax returns should be made public? That seems quite aggressive to me, but I think the thing I tweeted about this was I like the specificity of it because it is taking a risk to put specific things out there because then they're there to be shot at.
Yeah. And I like other things, like how he again continues to advocate that it should be a paid position to be president of U.S. Soccer, and I like that because it probably should be, because it would give you more motivation. It would make it more of a full-time gig. There would be more pressure though, because if you're getting paid, you got to back that up with performance, as opposed to, hey, I'm just here like volunteering, man. Like, you're lucky to have me. And I like that he made that point, that a lot of the times the criticism he saw or the criticism he heard or espoused himself was met with, you're lucky enough. And I think that that does need to change. I also enjoyed, for the most part, his 2030 project points.
Yes, this is the part that most people probably would have scrolled down to, because this is essentially Kyle Martino's Pro-Rel plan. And by the way, the URL for the website is Everybody's Game USA.
I'm going to back that up and say I didn't enjoy it as much as I read it.
Why do you say that then? So the 2030 project, which is essentially his Pro-Rel plan, he has laid out how he would get United States soccer, American soccer, and I always struggle with that because it sounds like I'm talking about the federation, but we get American soccer to a pro-rel place. At least I believe that's what he's done here, but there's a little bit of, is it wiggle room or is it badly worded?
I think at best it's badly worded, but I'm inclined to believe that it was maybe intentionally vague because he doesn't want to commit himself at least on text. And what we're alluding to, or what we're referencing, is the fact that he talks about lots of different plans to change U.S. soccer, like the domestic leagues, talks about instituting promotion relegation for USN NASL, does not talk about promotion relegation with Major League Soccer.
But it is called Project 2030. The header is a potential roadmap to an open professional soccer league. And it talks about everything leading up to 2030, like sort of not dissolving single entity, but transforming MLS single entity into individual clubs and ownerships, right? And then it talks about what would happen after 2030, where like adult leagues, like meaning non-professional leagues, would then be able to join the pyramid in like 2038 or so. It just seems that, to me, there's the subtext, or almost like the
implication.
The implication is that in 2030,
it's all about the implication in Philly,
in 2030 there would be pro-rel between either USL or NASL and Major League Soccer. It's heavily implied, but it's not actually typed up and on the page.
Yes, and as my future lawyer wife would point out, if it's heavily implied but not actually written out, then it doesn't exist. And I guess that's where I am with it, is that it allows that wiggle room for, and I'm not saying this is what he intended, I'm not saying this is what he would do, but if you were a lawyer, you would go back to that and say, I never said promotion relegation with Major League Soccer. That was not part of my campaign promises. I talked about how it would be helpful and more competition breeds better players, but I didn't specifically spell it out. And I'm not necessarily saying that Kyle Martino is like doing this like legal jujitsu, but I do think that maybe he recognizes that it's really difficult in a one-sentence bullet point to spell out your entire plan and not have it be easily picked apart. And you can't have conditionals in there. You can't have we hope to, or we seek to, or we will try to establish.
But it does. I mean, it does say like transition single entity MLS into a series of club. Like that's like, to me, that's an even bigger thing than having Pro-Rel, right? So I honestly don't think that this is a deliberate like subterfuge or hiding of it. I think it's just sort of poorly typed out. Proof, I would say, that this website looks great, everybody'sgameusa.com, because Squarespace is a great platform to host your website, and it really does look good, right?
Yeah,
it really does look
absolutely.
good. But Squarespace are not responsible for the text you put on the page. And if you are sort of do the A to Z, but you forget to put the letter Z on it, then that's your fault. That's not Squarespace's fault.
It certainly is. It certainly is. But no, you're absolutely right. It was simple. It's to the point. I like that it just says like he has his opening sort of explanation of his platform, and then you can click the image. It sends you to the plan. It's nice and simple. It's clear. It's cut. That's why we use the website as well. That's why we use Squarespace for our website.
There's a Pro-Rel plan on our website as well.
Is that really?
Well, you've just got to scroll down and listen to our podcast. You go to TotalSoccerShow.com, hosted by Squarespace, find our plan for Pro-Rel podcast, and there it is.
I genuinely thought for a moment that you had written out both of our proposals, and I was so fascinated as to how you have that much free time.
Truth is, I have plans to do that sort of stuff all the time, and I don't get around to it.
Best laid plans, Daryl. Best laid plans.
Yeah.
But if you have best laid plans to create a website, Stop making them plans, start making them reality, and use Squarespace to do it.
Yep, check out squarespace.com and get a free trial to set your website up. And then when you're ready to launch, use the offer code TSS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website. Mm-hmm. I really hope Carl Martino used the discount code TSS to get 10% off.
That would be lovely. We'll have to ask him. If we get a chance to ask him a question, I hope that's the one we go with.
I mean, I would ask, why isn't there a specific bullet point of MLS Pro-Rel 2030?
To each his own, Daryl, to each his own. And with that in mind, let's move on to our next question, which I'll let you ask, but I will preface with no.
All right, but we'll try and answer it.
Sure.
That's harsh, I think. Taylor Smith asks, would soccer benefit from a coaching staff similar to the NFL, where there would be an offensive coach and a defensive coach? And what would be the top combinations? For example, Jurgen Klopp, offensive coach, and Sean Dyche, defensive coach. Can we address my slip up there? Jose Mourinho would be the offensive coach.
Oh, see, I'm thinking like you have Bill Hicks on the sideline just screaming at people. That's your offensive coach. Yes. The reason why I say no is because in football, first of all, you have those coordinators, but you still have the head coach who kind of makes the overall game plan and decides on what they're actually going to do.
So the structure is head coach and offensive coach, defensive coach underneath, yeah?
But also in American football, you literally have one part of the team leave and another part come on.
That's the thing,
That's
right?
the difference, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's where you can have two different game plans because you're doing fundamentally two different things. Whereas if you're an attacker in a system that emphasizes you play you're the left winger, you always stay forward and you like hassle the center back by cutting inside. But then if the defensive coach is no, the left winger tracks back and cuts inside and acts as a third midfielder, suddenly you got some problems.
I think it also you've got to think of the sort of holistic nature of soccer and a soccer game plan, right? And I think so. Taylor Smith mentioned Jurgen Klopp as the offensive coach because you've seen Liverpool sort of break at pace and look so dangerous and threatening and tearing Man City apart. But the reason they're able to do that, I'm thinking specifically of the Mane goal. The reason they're able to do that is because they've got this defensive plan where they sort of block off all the angles and put you under pressure and force you into a mistake. That's part of the defensive plan. Then they transition into attack immediately and then they score because of that, right? Yep. So the two are so entwined that you really can't separate them.
No, you can't. What I do you think would be kind of fascinating, though, is if you had, to Taylor's point, if you had, Sean Dyche and Jurgen Klopp as your, assistant managers, and then you had, say, people are going to send tweets, if you had, say, Sam Allardyce as your head coach, and it was sort of like, oh, who are we playing? Man City? All right, Sean, get your game plan in there. Oh, we're playing a team that we should probably beat?
So he just cheated.
Yes, yeah. I think then that requires players to memorize two different, fundamentally incredibly technical and difficult approaches to the game, which is also going to be kind of problematic. One sort of variation on this then. So let's take Taylor's idea. Also, the idea of Jurgen Klopp taking instructions from Sam Allardyce would probably not go very well for him. It wouldn't go down well on Merseyside. No. So what about the idea of, say, a set-piece coach? Because that is a thing where the game stops and a new plan can be implemented, right? Not always, because sometimes it's fluid, like that Man City free kick. Yep. But what about, say, if Tony Pulis was your set-piece coach? I think that's a job that he could do for Barcelona or Real Madrid, could hire Tony Pulis just to come and coach how to cross the ball into the box and win headers on set pieces. They'd have to then play a bunch of 6'4" players. But I would actually say that's not the worst idea. Now, I wouldn't say it should be Tony Pulis, and I would say that I think probably some clubs do this. But the example I can give, Daryl, how familiar are you with onside kicks in American football? I think, is this when normally you kick off, you have to give it back to the team? Yeah. Is this when you kick it sort of sideways and try and get it yourself? So the ball has to go 10 yards from the kickoff. If it goes 10 yards, then it's a live ball. So anybody can recover it. Even that big kick, if nobody catches it, if the other team gets to it first, they recover it. Yeah. Now, what teams will do is they'll watch footage, and it's supposed to be you have that first wave of blockers that as soon as the ball is kicked, they go back and then set up the wall so they can block for the return man. Yeah. Now, what some teams will do is watch footage, and if those blockers leave too early, if they start running before the ball is kicked, then they'll spot that guy runs too early every time. We're going to do a short onside kick where he should be, but because he'll be running away, he won't notice, and we'll recover the ball. Okay. So it can be, if you watch footage of the game, you can spot these little areas of vulnerability. I talked about this with the weekend review with what West Ham did to Huddersfield, that they spotted. They try to build out of the back. If they can't play wide, then they play through the middle. Yep. Let's invite them to play through the middle. This is the Mark Noble goal. Yes, and so I think you could have that dedicated person who spots, they do this on set pieces, that is an area of vulnerability that we could exploit.
So they do have, I know clubs have video analysts, right? But they don't have as much authority, I think.
Oh, I see. So you're saying like free kick within 30 yards, Tony Pulis is out there like doing signals.
Yeah, or at the very least, like say the head coach was, let's say Jurgen Klopp, because he's kind of the man of the moment, right? It's almost like Klopp has to defer all authority to set pieces to Tony Pulis, who then steps in and they execute the Pulis plan whenever they're defending or attacking a set piece, right?
Yeah, I got you.
Or the video analyst, if we call him sort of an opposition weakness coach, right? You really sort of Klopp,
opposition weakness coach.
So Klopp doesn't have to accept his authority the whole time, but the guy should have some sway in the club to the point where if he says, hey, when Huddersfield take a goal kick, we should do this. Yeah. Like, he's got enough authority that, say, Klopp or the head coach or whoever it is will say, okay, you're usually right and we pay you good money. Let's do that.
All right.
You know what I'm saying?
As long as he has a headset and a clipboard, I'm down. That feels like a position that necessitates a headset and clipboard.
Any other notes on this?
No, I think we've covered it all.
All right. But thank you, Taylor, for the question. We kind of disagreed. Like, it was a hard no from Taylor. Yeah. But this opened up a lot of really good stuff to talk about.
Although I do love the idea of...
US national team should do this for sure.
Oh, the specialist thing?
Yeah, have a set-piece specialist coach.
I was going to say, it does open up the opportunity for two coaches to just get into a fist fight in their coach's box, because that is absolutely what would happen.
Well, that's how we could decide the next US men's national team head coach.
That's fine.
Ready for the next question?
Sure.
Okay, it's from John Adams, not that one. John Adams says, let's assume for a minute that the new US Soccer Federation president, whomever that is, top grammar, John, thank you, believes US soccer should align itself with the FIFA calendar. Do you think the January camp goes away completely? If not, what would it look like? And would you mind explaining the background in case people don't quite understand why John thinks the January camp would disappear with a European calendar?
Sure. So right now, Major League Soccer in its current system runs from March until December, we think?
For the champions and the runners-up, December.
But then you have the break until the season starts again in March, preseason starting late January, early February. So right now you have this kind of 2-month, 3-month, however long you've been, if you didn't make the playoffs, even longer, gap where you can sort of have the opportunity to call in those domestic players to that January camp to get them experience. And generally speaking, it's a lot of players who maybe wouldn't get looks otherwise because you've got other senior players playing abroad. So it's an opportunity.
Shout out to Ian Harkes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an opportunity to give players like Ian Harkes and Russell Canouse.
I know,
I say it just to annoy you. To get them for like USMNT looks.
Yes.
So to John Adams' question, I think, like, we look at Kyle Martino's plan for a second, and his plan to move Major League Soccer to a European calendar includes the provision for a winter break.
Yes.
So there could be an argument.
Because of sort of the north of the United States.
Yes.
New England being a good example.
Yeah.
Really cold, impossible to play on grass.
Yeah. So
outdoors.
If that break were, say, from like mid-December to mid-February, or maybe even later, then I would say...
a long time.
Then I would say, there's a chance that they go for it there to keep interest, and it does stay as a sort of like, hey, like almost like an all-star break sort of thing for like domestic players. But I think if like outside of that, I think there's a chance it goes away. Yeah. Because
the schedule gets a little tighter around it, right? And so it's also
you can't very well have one in June when Major League Soccer season would end if you went European.
Well, and then hopefully we've got some FIFA US games to play, right? Either World Cup or World Cup qualifiers or what have you. I think there's a chance it goes away because that schedule gets tighter, but there's also a chance that if there is room, it would just be like your best guys who are domestic based just don't get that couple of weeks off that they would have for the winter break.
Yeah, but now I'm fascinated with the idea of, say you make it sync up with Liga MX and you have like the Liga MX Mexico All-Stars versus the MLS American All-Stars playing each other in a one-off friendly.
Or do you know what we could do is every January have a January camp, play Mexico. Then it becomes an event, right? Rather than playing like Bosnia's B team, or South Korea's B team, or the teams that usually come and play. Serbia last year, I believe. If Mexico and the US both committed to this,
New Zealand did too, I think.
Both made room weirdly outside of the FIFA calendar, the FIFA international calendar, and just said our league seasons. We've got Mexico have the Clausura starting. MLS will have the second half of its season starting. We've got a winter break, but right in the middle, we're going to have this pretty high profile match, and we'll do it every year. It would add a lot more to the occasion, right? It would be a lot more exciting, and it would be a bigger challenge for the players.
Yep, and I think usually you can get a little bit more excitement. I think this year is a outlier because things are kind of bleak.
Right, because normally this would have been in the run-up to the World Cup, right? So we mentioned Ian Harkes because he was kind of like the surprise name on the roster, or Marlon Hairston. Like, you'd be thinking, one of these guys could be like they could be like the Jimmy Conrad who ends up on the World Cup roster when we thought it was impossible in January, right? But there's no World Cup roster to be on now.
There is not. Yeah, so I think, to go all the way back to John's original question, I think there's a decent chance that it goes away, and I'm not sure I would just be squeezed out so disappointed by that.
Okay. Why is that then?
I think just for the reasons we've already talked about, that you end up playing a B or C team. It doesn't necessarily translate to anything. It ends up being one of those weird trivia things where it's like, oh, this guy was capped in 2007 and then again in 2017.
Yeah.
Like those moments of like, wait, what? How did he already have a cap? He has 2 caps for the U.S.
The answer was Till Bunbury.
Yeah. But like, I feel like every time...
Or Tesho Akindele.
Also him. I feel like every time you and I see a player that we've like, wait, that guy has 1 cap? You always beat me to it, but you're always like, January camp. And you're always correct.
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't mind. So I do think the January camp is useful because you do get some gems come out of it that you didn't know about before, right?
Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Conrad, again, went to the World Cup in the end, right? But I think I do prefer the idea of national team call-up is always... You pick the 23 very, very best players possible. You get to pick the 23 very, very best players possible. And once it becomes like essentially a B team or whatever, because it's only domestic based or whatever, I think you lose a lot of the sense of occasion of a national team game.
All right, then let me go back to this then.
Hence the ticket sales for this one.
True. But I would say let's revisit this question this time next year, when hopefully there's a permanent U.S. manager in charge. World Cup has already gone, so then maybe things are looking a little bit brighter. But I think that also factors into it too, is right now there's a person in charge who we don't expect to be the head coach long term. So that also is sort of like, if it were... say Tata Martino had taken over. I'm going with him now.
I'd want to see his call-ups for January.
That's what I'm saying. But it would be more like, okay, this is the first insight into what he's going to do, who he's looking at. But right now, it still sort of feels like we're treading water. So again, that sort of dampens the enthusiasm.
Can I also just say, for this January camp, well, obviously we'll cover the game, right? January 28th when it comes around against Bosnia.
Oh, I'm sick that day.
I'm really excited for Ike Opara.
Yep.
Not just because
I know
of what we've seen on the field. Right? Do you remember the US Open Cup when he moved Latif Blessing?
Yep.
He physically picked him up and moved him because he wasn't where he wanted him to be defending a set piece. Maybe Ike Opara could be a set piece coach in the future. Also because he tweeted some knowledge, some accurate knowledge. Parks and Rec is better than The Office.
I'm not going to go accurate, but I'm going to say I get why you might be of that opinion.
He also tweeted, this made me laugh, he tweeted, I miss Benny because Fahab has moved. And also, Sardan EPB, but less so. It just made me think he's got a really nice, dry sense of humour.
He does. I'm now thinking about this. Office Season 1, not very strong, nor is Parks and Rec Season 1.
Yeah.
But then Office Season 2... it picks up a little bit, but I think Parks and Rec picks up way faster than Office Season 2. So maybe that's part of why he's feeling that way.
All right, here's a curveball. The Good Place, better than both.
Incorrect. So incorrect.
But still good, right?
Could not be more incorrect.
Still good.
Get out of this apartment.
Hey, I'm paying for half of this. Okay, we've got
that's true.
2 more questions to come. But first, I was hungry on the train today.
Yep.
Because it was delayed an hour and a half.
Yep.
And then we were delayed in DC for reasons we couldn't quite figure out. Got hungry on the train.
Well, to be fair, the Amtrak announcer did tell us why, and if you would like me to word for word recreate that, it was... But if you want to buy some tickets, go ahead and use our website for promo codes. Yep, that was the part that came through loud and clear.
But I really wish I'd had another Total Soccer Show sponsor in my bag. I could have gone for an RX bar.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because when we both got there to the Richmond train station, we were both a little bit hungry, and we both looked at that snack stand and thought... maybe I'm not that hungry.
Pass.
But RX Bar, I would have definitely been hungry and definitely been satiated in the end.
So today's show is sponsored by RX Bar. RX Bar's core ingredients do all the talking. It's simply like eating 3 egg whites, 2 dates, 6 almonds, and no BS. I believe the BS stands for bad stuff.
Yeah, sure. Why not? But that is absolutely true, though, because I would have much rather said I ate those things for breakfast than a chocolate muffin from the Amtrak snack station.
Is that what you ended up doing?
It is.
I thought you said you passed.
It was no, I went for that, but it was because I looked around and was like, Egg McMuffin that's probably been here for 12 years? I'll go with the thing that seems relatively fresh.
Well, speaking of fresh...
And let us not forget that a chocolate muffin is just cake.
With an RX bar, you can really taste the ingredients because there's nothing else competing, right? So if it's cacao, you can really taste the cacao. Mm-hmm. If it's sea salt, you can really taste the sea salt, which is a thing you want to do. Yeah. I've learned later in life, sea salt tastes good.
I don't know. With the chocolate muffin, I could taste the self-loathing. So I don't know, Daryl. But no, you're absolutely right. That would have been much preferable to the muffin.
If our listeners would like to get 25% off their first order of RX bars, you can visit rxbar.com/soccer. You have to go to that specific URL. Link will be in the show notes. Then you enter the promo code soccer at checkout. They make you work a little hard to get the 25% off, but it's worth getting. Thank you to RX Bar for sponsoring today's show.
Indeed. 2 more questions, as you said. Shall I go first?
Yeah, please do.
All right. Jared Morgenstern asks, considering the forces aligned against USSF MLS SUM right now, pushing Pro-Rel in some form or another, is there a good argument for MLS implementing Pro-Rel Lite? That would be dividing MLS into 2 closed divisions with an even revenue split and no relegation below MLS 2.
Okay, I've heard this idea before. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, there's more question.
Yeah, I think this could provide quite a few benefits of promotion relegation with none of the immediate risks for the franchise owner-operators for fear of dropping out of MLS, and this could give a roadmap to the future on how MLS could ultimately be integrated into the broader soccer pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I've heard this idea before. I've been for this idea in the past. I now do not think it's a good idea.
And we talked about why it might not be a good idea on the Pro-Rel show.
Oh, did we?
As did Peter Wilt in his article.
Oh, interesting. Mm-hmm. So let's see if I agree with myself from the past.
Sure.
And Peter Wilt. One of the reasons I see why it's suggested, but I don't like it, is because it would not provide the excitement of, Pro-Rel open system, the danger of teams dropping out the bottom of MLS2 into the lower regions. And therefore, it would be Pro-Rel without the benefits of Pro-Rel. And therefore, you could almost look at it and say, oh, we did it and no one was excited. Mm-hmm. Therefore, Pro-Rel's failed. Yep. Let's give up. Yep. And then they just merged MLS 1 and 2 back together and we're back where we started.
Yep.
Right?
And on top of that,
because there's a lot riding on this, right? Like, if we do Pro-Rel in the United States, it kind of needs to succeed within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, everyone's going to throw up their hands and be like, oh, we should go back to single entity.
Yeah. And I think with Pro-Rel anywhere else in the world, there's also that looming threat of relegation.
Yes.
That, you better work harder. Otherwise, you could fall down the leagues and it's going to be problematic. Whereas if you're proposing a system where it's 2 tiers with revenue sharing, if you're a club that doesn't really want to spend that much money or an owner that doesn't want to spend that money, you think worst case scenario is we're bottom of MLS 2, but we're still there. We're still getting as much money as we would be otherwise, and we're spending less. It doesn't really incentivize better competition, more spending, better competitions overall.
And then the bottom of MLS 2, there's not much going on there, right? There's nothing to fight against. Mm-hmm. Those games are really quiet and uninteresting. Yep. Like, even if they're getting an even revenue split, the players are not going to be as into it. Fans are not going to be as into it. You're not going to draw big crowds for the, say there's 24 teams. So the bottom 12, say it's 12 and 12, right? The 2 divisions. Like, the bottom 4 teams in that second division of 12, you're not going to go out to watch that team because there's nothing for them to fight for or against, right? So even with the revenue split, you're going to have a downward turn in interest in soccer.
Now, to advocate on Jared's behalf, I would say, though, that if you have established Pro-Rel in USL, NASL, and NPSL, for example, and you've got it kind of going there, you've established that, and then you've established MLS 1, MLS 2 as a sort of way to kind of establish it on both ways, and then you bring them together, say, 10 years down the road, and then it connects, and suddenly MLS 2 can drop down into USL or NASL.
Yeah.
Then that works a bit more.
Well, yeah, then there's the excitement bubbling up underneath, right? If we know we're working towards, Carl Martino would call it Project 2030, right? If you had a date where you're like, this is where the whole thing's going to connect, and it all, locks in, then I think we could do this. But if we only did this as a first step, I don't think it's enough to get people excited, and there's not enough upside to persuade MLS owners. Yeah. Right.
And then the final sort of nail in the coffin for me is just that it wouldn't be dramatic enough, that split, because it would just sort of be like imagine trying to explain this to your friend Hugh from England, and he's like, and he heard oh, I heard you guys got promotion and relegation in the US, that's exciting, and you're like, yeah, and what it means is that half the league is now in this tier, but then you can go back up, and the other, he would just be like, oh, so it's just 2 conferences now? It wouldn't be that sort of oh, I see, okay, it makes sense. It would just sort of be a very, to use Jared's term, a very light version.
And here's why I'm kind of on board with Kyle Martino's plan, is that even though he may have worded it badly or forgotten to include the actual Pro-Rel part, the thing of breaking up single entity into single club ownership, I think, is more important than just having a thing that we can call Pro-Rel, which is what MLS 1, MLS 2 with nothing dropping out the bottom would be, right? It would be Pro-Rel in name only, without this sort of inherent structural change that is what people are really talking about.
I wonder now that you say those things, I wonder if maybe part of his sort of thought process is
Martino?
To go back to his plan, it's that he would move it from single entity to each club owner owns that club, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if his thought process is if you have promotion relegation in every other competition in U.S. soccer, that the interest in it would grow to such an extent that you would start to have MLS owners agitate for them to implement that system.
Oh, so you're saying once they're no longer in the single entity system, then it's almost like the obvious choice is to get involved with the rest of it.
I mean, I guess so, but that still relies on billionaires or millionaires thinking, you know what, I want to put my investment at risk just because. And I still think that's going to be difficult.
Well, Eric Ronaldo would argue that he could persuade them that they're not putting their investment at risk. They'll actually be increasing the long-term profits. Just look at Eintracht Frankfurt, excuse me. I remember him saying that essentially you can still make money getting relegated. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to do, I think we can tell we're getting closer.
No comment.
We're getting closer to the election date. Yeah. We're going to get more and more into US soccer presidential stuff.
And I would say we've had some people ask, I don't plan on endorsing any candidate. I don't know if the show does either, unless we end up sitting down with them.
You say the show like there's some other person we can ask.
I've just seen a ton of people oh, sorry, I stepped on that one. But I've just seen a ton of people saying we officially endorse, and people have asked us where we stand. And I don't feel comfortable enough with any candidate's platform.
There's not enough platform information out there to be 100%, yes, this is who I want to stand behind. We don't get to vote, therefore we kind of don't have to decide, right? I more think of our job as maybe in the next month or less, maybe kind of just analysing or offering some insight into the various platforms that we see, but without being able to say, we know the whole picture, we know what's happened behind the scenes, here's how we endorse or how we would vote.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm down for that.
Sorry, one more bit of election news if you don't mind. Did you see the Washington Post Stephen Goff story about possibly Martino and Wijnaldum combining their bid to make sure that one of them at least won?
And I think if I were pressed, I could tell you who goes where.
All right. Regardless of that, do you think that's a good idea?
I mean, with the caveat of what I just said, which is I can't say that I really know enough about any one candidate's platform to say, oh, they're really missing this. That's deficient in both Martino and Wijnaldum, but Cordero has that or Kathy Carter has that.
Yeah.
So with that said, I would say, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think it kind of combines both of their strong suits.
And I think they're not that different either. Their platforms are somewhat similar. So right now they're kind of splitting the votes between them when they might be better off combining and having all the votes of people who feel a certain way come into one bucket instead of two buckets, and then let someone like Kathy Carter get more total and walk away with it, right? Or Carlos Cordero. Speaking
of total, I will also add, though, that Eric Wijnaldum was on the Total Soccer Show and did not have complimentary things to say about Kyle Martino.
That was early on. That was early on, and Martino, I think, only just announced. I get the feeling that Wijnaldum was kind of bristling at the idea of being not the only high-profile candidate at that point, right?
Yeah.
And that changed things a little bit. In the Stephen Goff Washington Post article, he has very complimentary things to say about Kyle Martino and his plans for US soccer. So there's definitely the beginnings of a sort of, what's the word, détente?
But I wouldn't mind knowing why that came about.
Well, maybe they just talked. I think they have met and talked this out, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. But we're getting into speculation here because we don't know is the real deal. All right. Final question. Final question today comes from Guy Yedwab. Guy wants to know if, by the end of 2018, FIFA creates an international system of nations leagues, will this change how smaller nations look at the World Cup? So, there's more to this question, but I want to sort of explain this as we go. The Nations Leagues is the thing that's coming for CONCACAF in September, right? CONCACAF League of Nations, I believe it's called. And there's a UEFA Nations League or UEFA League of Nations.
It's a bad name.
It is, right? Where teams within national teams within a confederation will essentially play for competitive points in sort of mini league tables, and it'll be tiered. So the bigger teams play the bigger teams, and the smaller teams play the smaller teams. Right. The rumor is that FIFA are looking at this and seeing the confederation setting up their own things and saying, we can't let them have all that fun. We're going to make a global FIFA league where we control that whole thing.
FIFA saw a pie and thought, wait a minute, our hands aren't in that pie.
Give me that pie. So, Guy is asking...
Fingers in the pie? or hands in the pie?
My mouth goes in the pie.
Maybe both.
Will this change how smaller nations look at the World Cup? Guy says, if you're a country that doesn't regularly qualify for the World Cup, for example, El Salvador or Gabon, would it be a higher priority to focus on World Cup qualifiers or on your Nations League rankings? Do you think there would be a push to switch the World Cup from FA Cup style, where it's open to every level, to Champions League style, where it's only for the top ranked in the top leagues? So
not to be contrarian here, but is the World Cup FA style?
So FA Cup style is where sort of everyone's drawn against everyone else. I would say it's more like you have to qualify for the World Cup, right?
Okay.
So it's not quite FA Cup style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so to go back to the initial question, I don't think you necessarily have to prioritize one or the other, because it's not...
Yeah, they don't happen at the same time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're qualifying for the World Cup while also playing those... Like, it's not like you're
Nations
qualifying
League
for the
games.
World Cup on a Tuesday, and then on a Wednesday you're playing the Nations League games. Like,
Yeah.
You would probably still have like what you have in Europe, basically, where you sometimes have a World Cup qualifier on a Thursday, and then on that following Tuesday you have a friendly or vice versa. Like, you might get that, but I still don't think you have to necessarily... like, look at things and think, okay, we're playing a B squad in that competition to focus entirely on this one. I think you could still do both.
I agree. Yeah, I don't think you have to prioritize. So that's that answered, basically, right? Is that you don't have to. National team games are so few and far between.
Unless I've dramatically misunderstood what Guy is asking.
Well, Guy, let us know if we've got this wrong. I think we understand
Okay.
it. So the idea of, we might disagree that the World Cup is FA Cup style right now, but it is like you qualify within your region, right? I think when he says Champions League style, a World Cup, maybe that if you just look at the FIFA Global Nations League, if FIFA were just to say, all right, we'll take the top 32 or 48 ranked teams, won't have a whole qualifying tournament, we'll just take the rankings from our Nations League, or you go to the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's a thing that could happen in the future, where the actual qualification tournaments that happen now are got rid of, and you just take from the Nations Leagues.
I guess that could happen. I think that's a really bad idea.
You do?
I do, because... then if you're doing that, so say we know it's going to expand to 48 teams, right? So say you do have like the top 10 teams in the top tier. If you have Argentina, Brazil, Germany, France, whatever.
You missed England, but yeah.
They might be in there. It might be right on the outside. Like, it still means that those teams are going to play each other all the time. Then you're going to send them to a World Cup where they're going to play each other all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't you don't have that air of excitement that you do in a World Cup, where suddenly Brazil and Germany are going to play each other, and they so rarely play each other in a competitive fixture that it makes it that much more alluring.
But would you rather have 2 Brazil-Germany games in a year, or would you rather have 1 Brazil-Germany game and then 1 Germany-Luxembourg game? You see what I'm saying?
Well,
maybe it's better for the big teams.
But
I
think you could have something in between, where you could have what you're going to have, which is a Germany-France game that means something, and then also a Germany-Brazil game in the World Cup. I think that's where I am with it. Is that
so you're arguing against the concept of a Global Nations League at all?
Essentially, yeah. I don't think it makes that much sense. I especially don't think it makes sense because as you get further down, you have to make it regional, because I just don't see how Antigua and Barbuda are going to be traveling to Bhutan or whatever, or something like that to play each other. Yeah. You kind of would have to do that.
Yes.
And then it begs the question...
Well, you could have a world soccer pyramid.
I guess you could.
It's not on Carl Martino's website. I think he hasn't got global ambitions in that way.
But I don't think that there's enough fluidity in there. And I also think that it then means that, like, if you're fortunate enough to be the 48th team in the year that a World Cup happens, then good stuff. But that cannot necessarily be as rewarding as you've found your way to qualify. And I think your point when we were talking about this earlier was that, like, you don't then have the opportunity for Panama to go to a World Cup when they otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's true. It removes the possibility of, like, an Italy or Netherlands failing to qualify unless they have a horrible, like, 3 years and they drop down the rankings and they're actually like a third tier team, right? But it also removes the possibility of one fairy tale run, right? Where Togo can go to the World Cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they did that one time.
Where I could see it working, and I think would be interesting, is if you had something like, you still have your World Cup qualifiers. This is getting into a lot of games, I understand. But if you still had your usual World Cup qualifiers...
Cancel Club Soccer.
But you still had your, like, respective leagues of nations. But say you did have in the, like, third tier in CONCACAF, say Cuba, like, finish top. Maybe you do leave, like, one of those qualifying spots from CONCACAF open to, or, like, because CONCACAF are going to get, 6.5 in the expanded format, we think. I believe
so, yeah.
So say that half is, like, Cuba, who finished top of their small group, playing another small, like, minnow group, so that even if they didn't necessarily qualify outright from CONCACAF qualifying, you still have that half spot available.
Ready to have your mind blown? This is what UEFA are doing.
There we go.
So for Euro 2020, they have made the UEFA Nations League the qualifying tournament for Euro 2020. Not for the whole thing, there'll still be a qualifying tournament. but a few spots will be available through the UEFA Nations League.
Yeah,
right?
that makes sense.
And so I think there's anyone in the top tier that hasn't qualified via the normal qualification competition they'll do. There's a spot for them, and there's a spot for second tier and for the third tier if you win your third tier tournament or your second tier tournament. So your brilliant idea has already been adopted by UEFA.
There we go.
Yeah,
I like it.
They've rubber stamped it fast.
Perfect. I'm going to say that I invented it then. You're welcome, UEFA.
So if you found all of that confusing to follow, which I understand.
So did I.
If you may have, right?
Yeah.
No, but we've talked about this and looked at this quite a lot, the Nations League stuff, mostly because I'm kind of excited about it. I think all to say is, after the World Cup, after the 2018 World Cup, get ready for a bit of a shake-up in terms of how international soccer works. Because there's going to be a lot of new things coming online, and they're going to be very confusing to start with.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be for the better, because it'll be more competitive games with more on the line each time.
I agree. I still, to me, this is like the newest version, or like a different version, but the same idea of the World Cup should be every 3 years or every 2 years. It's too long to wait for this competition that everybody loves so much. But part of the reason why everybody loves it so much is because it is this rare event that you have to work really hard to get to.
Yeah.
And it means that like it creates that much more drama. And if it is suddenly like, oh, those 15 teams are going every time.
But I don't think the Nations League thing will take away from the World Cup, because the World Cup has this like thing where it's hosted in a location and it's treated like the Olympics, and it's got this like glamour around it in a way that just a Brazil-Germany Global Nations League thing would not attract, say, your dad to watch it, right? But your dad would watch it at the World Cup. You know
I suppose that's true, but then that's great for the neutral fans, but that's not what a lot of people are around the world.
Yeah.
And I just still think that if you had the top tier...
It'd be great for our podcast.
That's maybe, but I feel like...
A competitive US game almost every international date with points on the line.
But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about like if you had FIFA controlling the whole thing, and so if it was Brazil, Argentina, Germany, France, like those huge clubs just playing each other all the time, and then at the end of it, it's like clubs. I know, national teams. But
I wasn't going to correct you. I was just going to smile.
But if you had like those 10 teams, and it was like, oh, they just finished playing each other, and now they're all going to play each other again.
To be fair, the way the Nations League, the UEFA Nations League, and the CONCACAF Nations League, I believe, would work is they're not in one big table.
I know
they're split, so they wouldn't be playing each other all the time.
I know, but I'm talking about if FIFA took over and made it a world league. That's what I don't like. That's what I don't want. I'm okay with UEFA doing what they're doing. I'm okay with CONCACAF doing what they're doing. I just don't want it to suddenly be like, yep, all the biggest nations in the world are playing each other, and then they're going to do it again in the World Cup and also in the Confederations Cup, maybe a few more times. Yeah, we just want everybody to be playing everybody all the time.
All right, I'm drawing a line down the middle of this table. Oh, there's already one here. Oh, all right. There's a line down the middle of the table, and we're on different sides.
Fair enough.
All right. So thank you.
I'm going to go buy duct tape. We've already talked about this.
War of the Roses style. Thank you to RJ, Taylor, John, Jared, and Guy for today's questions. If you'd like to ask a question of the Total Soccer Show for us to answer on air, go totalsoccershow.com/questions. You can leave your question there. It will populate a spreadsheet, thanks to Squarespace. If you are a $10 month or more subscriber, we guarantee to answer one question per month. And you can become a subscriber at totalsoccershow.com/join.
I have a question.
For me?
Yes.
All right.
The duct tape thing.
Yeah.
You keep referencing War of the Roses. I have no idea what that is.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's the Michael Douglas,
Yeah.
Kathleen Turner film. Well, I haven't seen it in many, many years, where they're married, but they got this beautiful big house that I think they don't want to give up.
Okay.
They get divorced.
There it is.
What they decide to do is draw a line down the middle of this big, beautiful house and live on opposite sides of it. And then it descends into sort of really, I mean, it's comedy, but it gets real nasty. Like they sort of get very violent. I think they kill each other. Spoiler alert for War of the Roses.
Does that not also happen in Grumpy Old Men, or what's the other one, The Odd Couple? Or am I just completely making that up? And it's actually War of the Roses.
Yeah, I know mine happened.
Because every time you say that, I think like, was that part of that war? Like well, I think that's the division
joke.
Via duct tape.
That's the joke. They were Mr. and Mrs. Rose, but it's the War of the Roses.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah?
Of course. Oh, Hollywood screenwriters. You're the best.
All right, well, I know what we're watching tonight in the Airbnb.
God, that's right up there with Brian from Family Guy naming his main character Norm Hull. And it's like, that one's for the scholars.
I remember that film being good. All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, Kathleen Turner.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Slash